We are fighting against the stream to free our minds. And it's a practice, but you got to start by doing.
Yo, Chris, man, what are you doing? What are you up to?
I'm just helping people reinvent their lives. No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. Well, I'm going to join in.
Cool.
God bless, we're breaking these runs. Life too short to play it on speed run.
All right, Todd, what's going on today? How you doing?
Doing great, man. I am super excited that we got together to launch this podcast on reinvention. And if you're listening, this is our first episode, man. My name is Todd Jason, and this is my business partner, Chris Thide. And Chris, man, why are we doing this? Why did we decide to start this podcast?
Why did we decide to start this podcast? Because we want everyone to live the life that they want. I want to live the life that I want. You want to live the life that you want? Why else?
Well, I think when we got together, we're both career coaches. We're helping people transition from careers that they're either burned out, they've either been shown the door, people have been shown the door, in corporate America, or a lot of people have already started to reinvent themselves. When we got together, man, it was really enlightening. And by the way, just so you all know, this is our first podcast together. Chris and I met on TikTok, like two kind of middle-aged, mid-professional guys, TikToking away. And I saw his videos and I was like, man, I just got to reach out to that guy because he's talking about similar stuff. And so that's how this all started. And then here we go. We launched a community around reinvention. And now we're launching a podcast around it because there really is a process to getting to the other side. And our core concept on this is that your next career move can be your best when you design it around who you want to become and not who you were. And I know, Chris, as a person who went through a major reinvention, someone that worked in corporate for 20 years, you dealt a lot with that identity stuff, like putting that past behind you and then trying to create this new version of yourself. So you want to talk about that? Yeah.
Yeah. And first of all, I think that's part of why, we met on TikTok, why I was in a place where I said yes to let's work together and let's do this thing together is because I had done that work to lean into who I want to be or really who I am and reveal the layers on top of who I had told myself I was supposed to be versus who I really am. And being able to embrace this new version of myself. That is reinvention, right? And I think I spent so much time in corporate kind of living to what I perceived other people's standards or ideas were for so long. I really kind of lost who I was, who I wanted to be.
Right.
And that journey over the past, really 10 years has kind of been the focal point of that journey to who I am. And I'm still on the journey. And that's the beauty of life, is still being on the journey, has been super joyful, super abundant, been just the coolest part of my life so far. That's what I really want for people. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why we're doing what we're doing, is to help people find that joy. I'll take issue with something before. Are we career coaches, Todd? Or is that part of the big picture thing that we're talking about? And career is a major focal point for Reinventors, but I think it's bigger than just career.
Well, I think you're right on, man. We're here to talk about life transitions, living to your best self. Look, we're all living with less than 10% of our potential in play right now. And I've been coaching. I never was in corporate. My background is I started working as a coach in the early 2000s, and I have had the benefit to work with people like Tony Robbins and Deepak Chopra and Eckhart Tolle, old school people who wrote big books a long time ago. And that started me on the path of developing curriculum and working with literally tens of thousands of people, not only on career, but also on just life transitions and how do we do that. And I think what we want to do here is talk about what we found really works. The reason why I partnered with you, it's funny, so everyone just knows, when Chris and I started to kind of talk about this idea of doing a podcast and a community, he's like, well, why do you want to work with me? I'm like,
why me, Todd? Why?
Why me? Brother, you are the model of somebody who was working in corporate, literally did very well. You were making bank, brother. You really got up to a high level and then experienced what a lot of people do is burnout, and then spent time going through this process of reinvention by yourself pretty much. And when we met, our first conversation was wait a minute, there's actually a process here that you did that I've been kind of teaching, that when we just kind of nail it, we can help people get to that reinvented self faster, right?
Right.
So that's the goal here, right? Is to help people get there faster.
I love that. I mean, I think it is, if you look at the stuff that we teach and work with people on in our community, it is, I've done all those phases, or I'm still some of them going through. It's iterative, but I didn't have names for them. I didn't really have clear concepts for them. And boy, it would have been helpful to have that framework 7 or 10 years ago, right? When I was first kind of dipping my toe into this idea of, hey, this isn't for me, like what is for me? And going through that, that exploration process, right? I mean, I'll actually say, I never really made a decision in the beginning of my career as to what it was I was going to do for work, right? It was really just kind of a little bit of like Plinko, right? Where I just kind of found my way into something. It really was like just stumbling, bumbling, and then ended up in something when I was like 24, kind of had circumstances of life that like made it good to be secure. And then I just kind of did that for 20 years. Like, it evolved. I made the mistake of being good at it. So I got promoted, I got paid more money, I got enticed, I got sucked in. And like along the way, I kind of lost myself.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that actually, sad as that story may sound on some level, that's probably common to like 95% of people, at least in America or sort of like Western culture.
Yeah. And what's happening right now, man, like you're right on. Cause that's what I've been like dealing with, people that just follow the script. They achieve the success externally, but like they're not that happy on the inside. And then they start looking for other things, or they start questioning why. But what's interesting about this moment in time and why we launch Reinvention now is that the shit has hit the fan a little bit, especially with AI and what's going on in the world. And we're not going to focus on all that, but reinvention is now being forced for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And our whole stance, mine is at least, I don't want to speak for you, like 100%, but that it's actually an opportunity.
It is.
Reinvention is an opportunity to stop and be like, all right, what is it that would make me happy? What are my interests? What are my passions? And can I marry them with my money making and my abundance and my lifestyle? Because most people didn't do that, which is why you get that proverbial midlife crisis. And look, reinvention is a process. It's a process that has a level of predictability to it. And, you don't realize that when you're in it because it's stressful and you're worried about money and you're worried about your relationships and your family. But the whole point of doing this is that, there's a game plan here. There's a roadmap for reinventing myself. And if I can just learn it and latch onto it, I can start to experience some of these new levels of success and joy faster, right? And so you kind of bumbled your way through it over the last 10 years. But like, if you would have had this concept or these concepts we're going to talk about, you would have gotten there faster.
Yeah. And again, we're not saying it's going to be easy, right? I think that's a key distinction, is we're not saying it's going to be easy, but it is repeatable. It is a process. There are certain areas, and we call them tenets, that you have to tend to as you go through this. And having that framework and being able to think about it kind of like a territory that has a map really, really, really speeds you up. And also just gives you some confidence when you're having the tough days to be able to say, hey, you know what, stay the course. There's a plan, there's a process here. Going back to where I said I didn't really ever have intention with the work that I ended up doing, goes back to like the first tenet of reinvention, which is clarity, right? Which is, I never had really clear in my mind, like, what am I doing this for? What's the North Star? What's the direction of travel? I just was sort of like, well, the bills come, you got to make money. I'm doing a thing. I'll do more of the thing to make more money. But, in doing that for years and years, I never had like a real, like, to what end? What's the destination, or where's the direction of travel, at least, that I desire, that I want?
Yeah. And I'll tell you this, man, all my years of coaching, that's where I begin. Right? Like people come to me and they say, I'm not that happy, or I got issues. And I'm like, okay, let's start with, what do you want? Like, what would be an amazing life for yourself? What would be idyllic? Let me just like play that game with you for a minute. And people look at me with this blank face, like,
yeah, how good do people do at that question?
Zero.
Right? Because at least maybe you've had different experiences than me, but my experience has been that when I ask a question like that, the first thing people start to tell me is what they think is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning within the circumstances of everything in their life right now, what they think is like could be the next incremental thing that they could potentially do.
Right.
The question is actually, if there were no constraints in a sense, if there were no incremental requirement, like what do you want?
Exactly. So
Question.
this is why reinvention has to begin with clarity. And actually what it really begins with, even right now as you're listening to this, is permission to dream again, permission to get out of the trajectory that you're in right now, not like to change your whole life. It doesn't mean that like everything's going to change overnight. It's an exercise. It starts off with an exercise where you give yourself a moment to think really big about your life, your work, and you sense into what you want. And you mentioned this term before. You mentioned the word North Star. Okay. And like a big linchpin of the work that I do with people is giving them that permission. We have practices in our community that helps people do that, right? Because most people are not accustomed to it because we're not trained that way in school. Like think about the trajectory. You went to school and you were taught English and math and science. Like, look, great subjects, but no one looked at you and was like, okay, like, what do you want to do? Who are you, Chris? Like, who are you, Todd? Like, what do you want to do with your life? Like in that bigger picture. And maybe some of you had parents that did that, but most of us didn't.
Yeah.
And that's why we followed this path. And now we're here midlife thinking, man, like what's next? And so starting with clarity is so very important. And we want to jump in, I think, to like how to actually do that. But I know you had some things to jump in on around clarity. Yeah.
Well, you got to some topics that are near and dear to my heart, right? Which is, I'll say that some of us had parents or systems that actually were trying to tell us what we should be, right? So there is that, right? And so then when you get to this concept of what people describe as a midlife crisis, I actually started to refer to it as a midlife revelation, but I really do think that it's clarity, right? I think that what happens is when you hit these ages, when you're 40, let's say, you know a lot more about yourself than if the last time someone asked you, like, what are you going to be when you grow up was when you were 11. With all due respect, I have an 11-year-old. They don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But when you're 40 or 45 or whatever it is, you do know a lot more about yourself. The problem for most of us is we've spent 20 years not engaging with that at all.
Right.
Right. So I think that this is a moment in the world. Yes. And it's a great moment in people's lives. This time in general, this midlife time that you can tap into a clarity that you couldn't access earlier in life.
I think it's like the biggest opportunity of all. And I know there's a lot of fear and doubt and uncertainty. And look, going through reinvention when you've already been on a trajectory is hard. Chris said this before. We don't have a magic pill that's going to, like this episode is not, you're going to swallow this magic pill and all of a sudden you're going to be exactly on the right path, like making tons of money, doing exactly what you want to do. It's a process. Okay.
We should put this behind a paywall if there's going to be a magic pill in this episode. Yeah. Quickly
It's
put
ridiculous. I tell this to people all the time. I go, look, my work is not the sexiest work. Like I'm going to give you the real predictable process, but like, it's not going to be the thing. And you go on social media and everyone is talking about, oh, just do this one mindset shift or just do this one supplement or whatever it is. And all of a sudden, and look, there are things that can help, but it's incremental. Okay. And starting with clarity is the big lever. And I've seen magic happen. I've helped thousands of people get clarity. And the way that you actually start, and this is just a little bit of the teaching here. So if you're listening to this, like take notes on this and take what we're going to share here to heart, because getting clarity is a thing. And it's an exercise where you get out of your own way. And the way that I recommend people to do it is to carve out a day or even a weekend if you can, where you put all the typical work aside. And look, if you have a family, you're going to be a family person. I'm not saying like run away from your whole life, but a personal retreat, like some level of personal retreat. Get out a notepad, get out some music, create some space for yourself, and allow yourself to think about the question, what do I want to do? What would make me really happy for my work, for my life, for my adventures? Like just give yourself that moment in time to create a much larger canvas for what's possible for yourself. And while you're doing it, you're going to meet all the stuff. Well, that can't happen. Well, this can't happen. You'll see how the limitation comes in. But the most important thing about this exercise is just to allow yourself the space to dream. Like have it be fun. have it be imaginative, like use your imagination. Like you got to reinvent by starting there. Okay. Trust me on this. Like this is so very important just to give yourself that time and the space. It'll speed up the process. And before I hand it over to you, the one thing that's so fascinating about creating this North Star, as we call it, like this life vision, okay, which is just a fun exercise, something that you can actually have out there, is that I say it becomes magnetic. Because when you actually start to put that out there, like it's amazing what happens. And I'll give some examples of people that I've worked with where it's like, wow, all of a sudden the right people start showing up, or some of these synchronicities start happening, or you kind of like get an email from somebody that's more aligned with that vision. And slowly but surely you start to understand that, wow, there's really some magic here whereby I'm putting out there that like, this is what I envision or what I want. And then life starts to show these things to you in the most incredible ways, and when that starts happening, you go for it, because then you start to see, wow, there's something more here. And it really is what I would consider to be a predictable process.
If you're just hearing this now and you're just kind of thinking about, oh yeah, maybe I will do that clarity exercise. I'll do that mini retreat or whatever it is. I'm going to tell you, the first thing that you think of, or the first things that you start to think of, allow yourself to get a little weird. Mm-hmm. Allow yourself to get out of your framework and out of your realm. I mean, I talk about this in the career area a lot, where someone's like coming to me and they're an accountant and they've been an accountant for 20 years and they're miserable. And I'm like, in your wildest dreams, like, what could you be if you weren't an accountant? And they're like, an auditor. And I'm like, wilder, dude. Be wild, be more wild than that. It's because like people are very anchored. We're all very anchored to like what we have been doing and who we have been in, and the personas that we have in our existing life. This is an exercise to unanchor. And I want you to write something weird that couldn't possibly work. I want you to think about possibilities that are in your mind impossibilities.
Chris, I got to share the story, because like when you just shared that, one of the practices that is really, really powerful, and by the way, it's like in our community, like to actually get clarity, is this idea of writing your own eulogy. Okay. Like really thinking with the end in mind, but doing that eulogy writing. If you don't know what eulogy is, it's what is written or said about someone when they pass. So you write your own now, while you're living and breathing, and you do it with that idyllic lens. So you actually write that eulogy from the standpoint of looking back on your life as if you've lived and worked and achieved like beyond your dreams. Okay. It's a tool. It's a practice that can help you access your imagination. Okay. And you don't do it with any attachment that any of it needs to happen. You just do it to get access to what you really want. That's what we're working at here, is just getting access to maybe some information that you really want. So years back, I was running a program of men. It was actually a men's group. And I had about 20 guys in this program, and I gave them this practice. Okay. And then we got back on after the weekend, and I was like, does anyone want to share? Is anyone brave enough to share? And this one guy raised his hand, and I can't remember if he was an engineer or an attorney, like a really nice guy. And he was kind of quiet, and I was surprised that he had raised his hand. And he's like, I'll read mine. And he starts reading his eulogy, like this imaginative, idyllic, like you have freedom now to imagine your life. And he's like, well, John Smith, worked up until he's 52 years old. And he was fortunate enough to retire at around 63. And his wife and him moved down to Florida, and they had a little cottage. And, at 74, he got cancer. That's what he said, I swear. And he got cancer, and, his wife took care of him. Then he eventually died. And then he stopped. And everyone in the room was just like looking at him. And it was like, and I said to him, I'm like, that's your ideal life, that you die at like 77. And we just went into it, and he started laughing, which was cool, because like he saw like how ridiculous it was. And I'm like, that's not the exercise. The exercise is just for fun, to dream big. And guess what happened with this guy? I got to just share very quickly. The guy was a game maker, like in his spare time. Like he was like this comic book game maker. I don't know. He was very creative, like that we didn't even know about. And his real dream was to figure out how he could do more of that and maybe make money. And so in his eulogy practice, he went off explaining how he was able to like write these new comic books, and it turned into this game and XYZ, something like that. Things started happening. And the guy, 2 years later, ended up leaving his career like on good terms. Like I think he was close to retirement, and and started some new venture with a bunch of people that he met. And he was like over the moon, you know, and he basically had written me back and said, hey, like I'm giving that practice the credit because I never would have even imagined that that was possible. And it opened me up to the idea that maybe, just maybe something different could happen.
It starts with maybe. It really does. I mean, I think it starts with just, I love that. That's an awesome story, right? And it's almost
I
like,
never told you that one, did I? I don't think I ever told you that one.
His projection was like actuarial. Like he was like, statistically, it's likely that I will die in my sleep with this and that. And like, and I think that's not what this is about, right? This is about, man, it all comes true. The hopes and dreams in your heart. Honestly, I'll tell you this, honestly, I think most people who they hear this sort of thing can't even easily access what those hopes and dreams really are down there, right? Like I know, I mean, I've done this eulogy practice fairly recently, and I'll be honest, it's been a couple of months. I don't know that I was fully honest and open with it, and I think that it's worth revisiting because it was like 85% of what I want and imagine and could in my wildest dreams. I think there's some things there I can't even really admit to myself I want, right?
See that?
Now we're getting into the deep shit, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is what it is. Like, I mean, how fascinating. We got the guy running the podcast who's a great coach saying, yeah, like I did it. And like, it's still hard for me to access. It's not that easy to access. Like we are fighting against the stream to free our minds.
Yeah.
And it's a practice, but you got to start by doing it. Like literally hope you're motivated to like take this on, like spend a day, spend a weekend, like really thinking about this and writing your eulogy and like checking out, because you're going to see it's not that easy for a lot of people. For some people, by the way, it's very easy. It's like, it just comes right out of them. For some people, it's like, oh my God, like, thank you for giving me this practice. Like this was all there, but I didn't have it organized. So there's a gamut. There's a spectrum here of how it happens. But for a lot of people, it isn't that easy, you know, and it is worth revisiting, Chris. Like it's something that I do every single year. And I will say I've been doing it for a long time, is that it always unfolds to deeper and deeper layers. And you know what else is interesting about it for someone that's done it for a long time, for like over a decade, is that I do have a sense of what my purpose and essence is. It doesn't mean that I've like manifested and created it all, but there is through lines that you find out about yourself. And a lot of it is what you said. It's like just being honest with yourself. Like this is not something that you need to then go out and start a TikTok account like we did and like start sharing with it. It's not what I'm saying here. We're saying do the practice. Start with clarity. That's where reinvention must begin, because there's old identity that needs to be confronted and transcended for you to land in that next career path that marries your purpose and your passion with your money making. And that's the game that we're playing here.
For sure. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. And I love the idea of it being iterative and this, because I hope to be evolving such that in a year from now, if I revisit it, there's new discoveries I've made about myself and who I am. The more I lean into this, the more I'm finding. And I like the idea. Yeah, there's through lines there, because I think, again, no matter how hard I tried to inhabit the persona or the identity that I thought was the right one in the corporate world for 20 years, underneath it all, there was always the core me down there. For me, I guess I'll just say, thank goodness that it continued to burn, right? And it still was there throughout all that time. And that I was able to tap into it and be like, hey, let's actually honor that guy. That's the real guy.
You know what I love about the clarity process more than anything? And this wasn't expected when I started teaching this and doing it myself, is that it's not just like the getting the life vision, right? Which is great. It's also like it creates the energetic of excitement and optimism, because it actually gives you something like really big to maybe look forward to. And I think that's such an underrated thing in our world. Like we are surrounded by so much negativity in the news. You know what I'm talking about, right? There is just so much that is beating us down from feeling excited and optimistic. And this practice just gives you an opportunity to look out beyond the horizon of your life and your past and all the negativity and say, what is possible? And here's what I found on it, is that by having that North Star, it gives you some level of intrinsic motivation to get through the hard stuff, because reinvention is not always easy. And we're going to talk a lot about that on this podcast. Like, it is not all roses. You may try stuff and fail. You may like listen to what we say and like go out there and like, oh my God, and then like it doesn't happen and then have to redirect. It's a process. But when you have that thing out there that you can connect with from time to time, it gives you that inner strength and fortitude and excitement to keep on going. And that's a very underrated quality of it.
Yeah, that's huge. Excitement is so important, right? That's something I was lacking when I was doing work that was not aligned to who I was. Boy, were the bad days really hard, right? I did not have, the key, I think, is intrinsic motivation.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of, extrinsic or external motivation of, got to make the money to provide for the family, or, this is the right thing to do to climb the ladder in my career. Very sort of cognitive, like, right things to do. A lot of shoulds in there. I hate shoulds, but they're in there. And then now I'm in a world that is really much more intrinsically motivated, because I care so much about what I do. I'm so excited to talk about this. I love working with people and coaching people. I love our community. Like, there's still hard stuff I have to do. There's still like kind of unsavory, not enjoyable work I have to do. It's still technically hard work, but it's easier to do with the intrinsic motivation of like, here's why. The why matters so much to me. And moving towards the North Star that I care about, that is what I want to accomplish with my one life on earth. Like, it's a hell of a lot easier to get through like the paperwork when you have that.
That's why you and I both love sports, right? Because it's like with sports, you see professional athletes or teams, it's like really easy, like winning the championship. And like, that's very motivating and it's very clear. Now, most of us don't have that. I had the honor to work with a couple of Olympic athletes years back. And like, I can tell you straight up that their life is not easy. And they are literally killing themselves to train to be able to do that. But their vision is so clear. It's like standing on that podium, putting that gold medal around their neck with like 20,000 people singing the national anthem and tears streaming down their face, right? Like, I'm getting the chills thinking about it. We all get it. That's their North Star. And that allows them, it fuels them to be able to do the hard work of doing it. It's the same with any athletes, and you can apply that in your life is the point. Like, you have to artificially do that, because most of us aren't Olympic athletes. I'm not, right? So the way that you artificially create that is by doing the work to get clarity, to create that vision that is exciting, and it just pays so much dividends. And look, when it comes to reinvention, that's the beginning, which is why I think we wanted to start this first episode that way. But it's not the end, is it, Chris, right? Once you get that vision, we don't just leave you hanging, because guess what? I'm going to give you a little secret. I say it really clearly around this practice. Just do it for fun. Don't be attached to any of it. None of it has to come true. But once you do it, like, wouldn't it be interesting if some of these things could come true? I don't know. Wouldn't it be like fascinating if you could reinvent your career that was aligned with who you want to become and not who you were in the past? Wouldn't that be an interesting thing? And there's other things that we do that we're going to talk about on this podcast that will kind of ground in some of this clarity that we're getting here, right?
Yeah, it's like finding your why, and then we're going to ask you why not. Then we're going to ask you why you can't do that, why you can't make that come true. And yeah, I think we also get into, we won't do it today, but we also get into, in our community and in some of the things we'll talk about in this podcast, how to make it reality, and that you have to have a plan and a path to get there to whatever your version of that is, right? And, we start with this really sort of ideal concept. And for most of us, there's going to be some incremental steps between here and there. Right. And like getting, a real practical, clear plan that you can follow to get you there is part of what we do. But again, it's starting untethered and thinking big and like really allowing yourself. I mean, this ties into this concept of what I love, or what we talked about, the idea of like, I want to find the limitation of my talent and my abilities, right? And I want to not be limited by fear or artificial limitations or a lack of effort because I'm worried about being vulnerable or whatever it is. And that's really where this concept of starting with really no parameters or no ties around your vision of what you want is really important, because all those like limitations can pop up really quickly if you don't consciously say, hey, you're like not invited to this party.
That's exactly right, man. And that's why, like, I'll even name them for people to understand. Chris and I have come up with 6 primary tenets for reinvention. This is the process. It's a blueprint, right? So if you're in a transition or one is coming and you know it, you can latch onto these 6 tenets. And the first one is clarity, like what we just talked about today. The second one is growth mindset, right? And you're going to hear us talk a lot about that, like how revolutionary 2 coaches talking about mindset, but it is really important. And we have a very particular way that reinventors need to think about and train themselves internally to orient with what's happening in their lives and in the world. And then the third is game planning, right? Like getting tactical. Like, what do we actually need to do to make this reinvention happen? We're not, it's not about just leaving you hanging with this like beautiful magnetic North Star. It's actually like, what is my plan? What is my roadmap for making it happen? And then it becomes about taking action. That's the fourth one. You got to experiment. You got to be out there. You got to be trying. Like, this is go time. This is where we get motivated and like, all right, no, this is the time where we're going to step into discomfort and we're going to try new things and reach out to people that maybe we wouldn't have in the past, because reinvention is on right now for so many people out there. And then the fifth one is building new skills. You got to learn new skills, because for a lot of people, reinvention is about hanging your shingle for the first time, starting consulting for the first time. Maybe you need to learn some digital marketing, or you need to learn how to write a book, or you need to learn how to do X, Y, Z, or do social media or a personal brand. For a lot of people, that kind of thing does tap into reinvention. And then the last one, which is so important, is getting accountability. Literally having people around you that are in that space that can support you, that you can also share your gifts and help them reinvent themselves. And so look, that's why we built the reinvention community, right? And because like in that community, we are literally helping people with these 6 tenets, like day in and day out. And if that's interesting to you, feel free to check it out. You can come and hang with Chris and I. Like, we're not going to beat it to a dead horse right now, because this podcast is like really about just getting that information about step number 1 out there, clarity, which is just so primary. But I did want to share, I guess, the 6 tenets.
Yeah. It's so exciting to have people in the community, and as we're talking to people and people are joining and just getting a little bit of people getting it, people being like, oh yeah, it's so great for people who are kind of just starting their reinvention to hear from the people who are already a little further along, and that mix. And again, this is the community I wish I had 10 years ago, right? Who knows? Maybe I'd be further along in the journey earlier in the path if I had done that, if I had that. So that's another thing. I just feel really excited to be able to give this to people. It's a gift in a way to people who maybe were in that same, like I said, midlife revelation moment.
Yeah. And we're going to close it out now, right? Because I think this has been really good, man. It's so good to have this first podcast with you, Chris. But, if you're listening to this, you got to the end of this, I want you to really think about this statement that your next career can be your best if you design it based on the future version of you that really lights you up and not your past version. Like, that's the key thing. You said in the very beginning of this that this is not just about career reinvention, it's about personal reinvention. And you're right, because it comes from the inside out. And so that's the game that we're playing. And I'm grateful to be working with you on it, and grateful to be working with all you out there that are hearing these words. We look forward to seeing you next time.